Hi students, my name is Louise. I'll be talking about writing the literary analysis essay today. So when you're writing a literary analysis essay, you want to be sure that you understand the story that you're analyzing. Whether it's a play, a novel, a short story, it's important to really understand what's going on. So if it's a short story that you're writing on, make sure that you read it many times because usually one reading is not enough. If you read it 2 or 3 times, you'll start to really get a sense of the characters and the events. So, don't forget that. It's important to really understand the work before you start analyzing it. Now it's time to look for conflict in the story. Where are the problems? And there are usually many problems because, conflict is what makes a story. So it's rare that you'll find a story with no conflict. So look for conflict, look for internal, external conflict, then look for what the protagonist wants or needs. Sometimes these two are at odds, and that creates internal conflict in the protagonist. So be sure to look for all levels of conflict within the story, and then look at the resolution of this conflict. Is it resolved or is it not resolved? Is the protagonist a different person or not? So all of these aspects of the story will help you to get to the themes, the underlying themes. Because, themes are not always obvious in stories. You have to read, you have to think, you have to analyze. So by following these steps, looking at the conflict, looking at the motivation, and then how the conflict is resolved, whether it's resolved, then you'll be able to understand what the author is trying to say with the story. And from that, you'll be able to create your thesis statement and then create your outline, which will be your blueprint for your essay. Don't forget to write an outline for your essays. It's the one way to have a very organized, clear, and thoughtful essay. Now, when you're writing a literary analysis essay, what exactly do you have to do? Usually, what you will do is choose one element of fiction in the story and relate it to a theme in that story. There are usually many themes in short stories, in novels, and plays. So it's always a good idea to choose something that resonates with you, that interests you. I'll be talking about a short story by Raymond Carver called Cathedral. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of Raymond Carver, but I love his short stories. They're very powerful, but written in a very simple, direct way. I am putting a link below so you can access the story that way. If for some reason you can't access it, you can probably find this story by Raymond Carver in any public library because he's a very famous writer, and that's a very famous story. It's a good idea if you read the story because then you'll be able to understand what I'm talking about in the rest of the video. So why don't you pause me and go read the story, and I'll be waiting right here. So I will talk about the story a little bit just in case you haven't read it. I hope you did. This protagonist, who is unnamed in the story, interestingly, is also the narrator because it's in first-person point of view. So this protagonist is dreading the visit of his wife's friend. Now, his wife has known this friend, whose name is Robert, for 10 years. She used to work for him. It so happens that Robert is blind. So Robert is coming for a visit because his wife just passed away. So he will be staying the night. And the protagonist is dreading this. We can really learn a lot about the protagonist through his thoughts. He believes in stereotypes about blind people. Robert is independent. He doesn't have a cane. So there's all these things about him that continually surprise the protagonist. He seems very hurt by the fact that his wife is close to Robert because he doesn't have that closeness with her. From the very start, the protagonist is rude to Robert. Throughout the evening, he's rude at dinner time. It's not very pleasant, and his wife is not happy at all. But Robert is very wise and kind, and he doesn't let it get to him. He seems to take the high road and not let anything bother him. Toward the end of the evening, the protagonist and Robert smoke marijuana, and that's another thing that Robert does. He's never done that before, but he does it because he wants to connect with the protagonist in some way. So Robert stays up. The protagonist's wife is sleeping. There's a show on TV, late night TV, about cathedrals. So the protagonist draws the cathedral at Robert's request, and then Robert places his hand on the protagonist's hand, and they draw together. And this moment proves to be an epiphany for the protagonist. He suddenly feels connected to something outside of himself. Now, you could argue that this is a religious experience because It is a cathedral that he's drawing. But I also see it as a kind of connection to humanity, because he doesn't have any, physical contact with anyone. He doesn't go to bed at the same time as his wife. So when Robert touches him, this is powerful. This is like this protagonist is so distant and isolated, and to have this positive energy, going through him, that could also be related to the epiphany that he experiences. It's the moment when the protagonist changes. It's the moment when he realizes that he doesn't have to stay in here. He's able to connect to Robert through his heart. It's almost like he's released from that self-imposed prison, and he's able to connect to something greater. It's a completely different protagonist at this moment. He suddenly becomes respectful of Robert. He suddenly, thinks, I should keep my eyes closed. This is what I ought to do. So it's almost a sign of respect for Robert, who is blind. You could look at the story from different perspectives, because it could be any religious building, it could be any faith, and it could be any person really who's lost, right? To me, it's kind of like a universal theme in this story: alienation, lack of meaning, existential crisis. I like to look at all the different aspects of it. You could focus on the irony in the story and the fact that Robert seems to be able to see more clearly than the protagonist. You could look at how the addiction is causing the protagonist to lose his identity. While his wife and Robert are talking, he doesn't seem to be able to, have anything to say. He has no opinion, and he admits that I had nothing to say to that. He seems really lost in his life, and he's unable to get out of this feeling of hopelessness, and that's why he drinks. So why don't we have a look at this outline here that I've prepared? The characterization in this story reveals how lack of social connections can lead to addiction. In the first body paragraph, you could discuss how the protagonist is isolated in his life. He has no friends, he's not close to his wife. This is clear from the very beginning. He doesn't respect her, and he's always criticizing her in his thoughts. And of course, you'll find citations from the story to put in there. This could either be direct quotations, or you could paraphrase some passages. Generally, you want to have a quotation or paraphrase for each point that you make in the body paragraphs. In the second body paragraph, you could discuss how the protagonist drinks to escape his feelings of alienation. It's clear that he's unhappy in his life. I mean, he's constantly thinking negative thoughts. He's critical. He's just very bitter. So it's almost like the alcohol allows him to escape and not have to deal with this feeling of isolation and disconnection from humanity. Do you remember when he gets up with his drink and he goes to the window as his wife is driving home with Robert in the car? So the protagonist is holding on to this drink as if it's some kind of baby's bottle. Alcohol is a crutch for him, and he relies on it to escape from any negative feelings. It's not really working, though, because he's miserable, but it's the only way he knows to numb the pain that he's feeling. In the third body paragraph, you could discuss how this protagonist's addiction is actually perpetuating his isolation, because anytime he feels any kind of discomfort, he drinks. And this is even with company. I mean, when Robert is there, did you see how many drinks they had, drink throughout the whole evening? It's his only way of dealing with his pain. But the problem is, it's causing him to feel numb and disconnected. So he's not able to break out of this cycle. So, he drinks because he's not happy. And then this alcohol creates a feeling of numbness. It allows him to escape because it gives him some temporary relief from emotional pain. He continues to drink, and even when people are there, so he's unable to connect with them. So it's continually, it's this cycle that's repeating in his life. This first person point of view is very powerful here, because if without that, you would just think like, oh, he's not very nice. But by understanding what's going on inside, then you're able to have more sympathy for this character. So don't forget to create an outline that shows the process of what's happening. That's how you break up your thesis statement as you explain it step by step. So you could establish one aspect, like in this outline that we've looked at, to show that he's isolated. And then the next one will be to show that he's addicted. And the next one will show the result of those two. I'll be posting 3 different outlines at the end. Have a look at those to give you other ideas of how you could approach this story. One more thing I would like to discuss today is my new book, which is on Amazon Kindle right now, soon to be in paperback version. There is a link below, so if you want to have a look at it, you can look at the look inside section on Amazon and read a few pages if you like. I think it could be helpful for not just first year students, but all undergraduate students. I discuss many aspects of school life and even personal life to try to help you to find more balance in your life. So thanks for dropping by today. I hope this was helpful. I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.